Welcome to the RPGBOT.Podcast. I'm Randall James, your peaceful protagonist, and with me is Tyler Kamstra.
Hi.
Awesome. And Random Pal.
Good evening.
Awesome. Tyler, what are we doing today?
We're going to talk about metacurrencies in tabletop RPGs.
Tyler, what is a metacurrency?
So a metacurrency is kind of a mechanic which exists kind of above your game. So it's a currency that you spend as a game mechanic rather than something that your character could carry around.
Gotcha.
So like probably the most commonly known example is D&D 5e's inspiration. So it's something that you as a player, as a character have, but your character doesn't know anything about it, but you as the player can choose to spend it to get something.
Okay, gotcha. And other tabletop games have, I don't want to say equivalents to that, but there are other metacurrencies worth talking about.
Oh yeah, tons. The idea of metacurrencies goes back at actually a really long time. One of the oldest examples I know of is from a generic RPG called Savage Worlds. They're called Bennies. Basically, you start every session with 3 of them. You get one for doing something cool, and you spend a Benny to do a couple of things. The most common one is just to re-roll dice. You can also spend it to not die and a couple of other important things. There's a lot of very recent examples. Pathfinder 2nd edition has a system called Hero Points, which are somewhere between Bennies and Inspiration. You can spend a hero point to re-roll something. You can also just dump all of your hero points to just stabilize while you're dying so you don't die in the middle of a fight, which is really nice. Let's see. So metacurrencies have existed in Dungeons & Dragons at least back to 3rd edition. The Unearthed Arcana book published a system called Action Points, which they were kind of similar to Inspiration. Like you could spend a die to re-roll something, but you could also spend the points to do some cool stuff like use daily class features more often or apply a meta magic feat to a spell, things like that. And then that system got reprinted, I want to say 3 or 4 months later in the very first original setting book for Eberron. So a lot of people mistakenly think that Action Points was originally from Eberron, but Unearthed Arcana beat it to print by 4 months. Probably my favorite metacurrency is Fantasy Flight Star Wars. It has a system called Destiny Points, where instead of players accumulating the metacurrency is a shared resource between both the players and the DM. The players spend it and essentially flip the metacurrency to the DM, who then has to spend it before they get it back. And the initial state of that pool of metacurrency is rolled at the beginning of every session. So you might start a session where the DM has all of the metacurrency and you have none, or the other way around. And that initial roll can do crazy stuff.
When your game master has to spend the metacurrency, are they spending the metacurrency against you?
Oh, absolutely.
I have been in a game of a Fantasy Flight Star Wars that Tyler ran, and these Destiny points could let you do some real crazy stuff. I mean, pull off things that were impossible with straight dice rolls, and there's a lot of leeway. And seeing how the GM chooses to spend them back, this is one place that has a lot of leeway where the GM can say, all right, I want this person you're fighting to do something which is really cool and defensive for them, so that we make the fight a more dynamic, more interesting story than just, great, you kill them in 3 rounds. Looking at you, 5th edition. Or if your players are really strong, if this is the game you're looking for, you can just say, yeah, shoots you, it hurts a lot. While on the one hand, that's not very fun as a story concept, it is a great way to balance if players have just built very strong, optimized characters. And if that's the game you're going for, that's a great way to do it.
I'm going to get hung up on this because that's actually fascinating to me. So maybe 2 questions. Strategically, do you ever find player characters or the players themselves basically saying, nobody spend the metacurrency because we've got a monopoly on it right now and I don't want to give it back to the game master?
Yeah. The core rulebooks for Fantasy Flight Star Wars actually call that out as a problem with the system. They specifically say, hey, your players might just sit on the metacurrency so that you can't use it against them. And if they want to do that, that's technically fine. You should tell them not to do that, but technically they're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And it would be up to the scenario. And if I would say that if they're that afraid to give it back to the game master, maybe the game master needs to reconsider what they're doing with that meta currency.
Well, so it's kind of a tactical decision sometimes. Like, say you're a bunch of characters, like you're a bunch of plucky Han Solo type characters out in space, and you know this session you're going to meet Darth Vader or some nonsense. You're like, okay, everything's on the line. We're probably going to die. Let's hang on to all of the meta currency that we can get because we're going to need to spend it down all at once to just barely survive. But yes, the fact that you called that out so quickly, well done. Because usually it takes people a session or two to figure that out just by playing the game. So for all you listening at home, if you figured that out on your own just as quickly as Randall did, good for you.
Nice. And then one more question. Does the available pool scale up?
Yes and no. So it's a dice roll, and everyone at the table, including the GM, rolls. So each person at the table rolls a force die, and it's got pips on it. And that's just how many points you get. So bigger pool for a larger party, which just means there's more for everybody to spend.
I got you. So it scales with the number of player characters, but not with like the level of the characters within the game.
Correct.
That makes sense. I do, as a quick aside, I have seen the dice. I think Random showed me the dice for Fantasy Flight. I'm just impressed that you could start a session by interpreting that and actually be able to move on.
Yeah. Boy, if you're ever going to play Fantasy Flight Star Wars, and I think their Genesis system uses the same dice. I haven't gotten to read it yet, so I'm not 100% sure. But the best thing you can do, just get the official Dice Roller app. It's so much easier because it'll organize all your things. It'll negate all the stuff. It'll read the chicken entrails to you. It's so much easier. Like rolling the physical dice is very satisfying, but very confusing.
Okay.
I will say, just to tag on to that, when I did finally get to experience those dice, I almost wanted to drag them into every other role-playing system that I'd used, because the room that it gives for improvisation and interpretation is so fun. Once you do get used to those dice, actually using them to build a story, amazing.
We should do an episode on that, because I've seen a lot of people suggest that for a lot of things. And yeah, we could talk about that for a while.
That seems real. I feel like it took Random about 25 minutes to explain to me how those dice worked. So yeah, that's probably an episode.
Yeah. Okay. So let's circle back to metacurrencies. So inspiration, like I said, is probably the most prominent example, but a lot of metacurrencies that I've seen work pretty similarly, where the GM or DM is responsible for awarding those metacurrencies for doing something. In 5e, it's kind of vague, but it's basically you do something cool. Here's inspiration as a basically a high five. Savage Worlds, it's pretty much the same thing. Like you do something cool and heroic. Cool. Here's a Benny. Pathfinder 2nd edition, hero points, same thing. You do something smart, you do something heroic, you do something exciting, here's a point. The problem that I have seen consistently from dungeon masters, like regardless of experience level, I'm sure there are better DMs out in the world than me. I'm 100% convinced of it. But it's really hard to know when to give them and how frequently.
No, but before we hop into that, I guess one distinction. So with the Savage World Bennies and with Pathfinder 2, you also start each session with a bank of them, right? And so maybe that's one key difference is versus with Inspiration in 5e. If you had it last session and you never used it, you should be able to carry it over, but you aren't guaranteed to get one every time. And if you're playing a long session, and as you said, if your dungeon master isn't being conscious of that, you might actually go a whole session without ever getting the benefit.
Yeah, Savage Worlds, Bennies are like a really central mechanic of the system. The dice mechanics are very swingy in Savage Worlds, so the ability to re-roll is really important for like, oh, my character's the world's greatest hacker. I rolled a 1 to hack this guy's Palm Pilot. I'm going to spend a Benny and, do the thing my character was built for. So you need that pool of Bennies at the beginning of the session for Savage Worlds to make the game work as intended. Pathfinder 2nd edition, you get 1 hero point guaranteed at the beginning of every session. And the GM is expected to hand out 1 hero point roughly every hour of gameplay. So like the hero points are supposed to come consistently. So you always have them available to use them when you need them. And pretty reliably, you will have 1 hero point sitting around that you can spend to not die.
So we should talk about like dungeon masters not being good at giving out inspiration in 5e. the other half of it is I know like I have a problem as a player character where, I treat it like an elixir in Final Fantasy. It's like, ooh, better save this and never use it because surely the next time will be the urgent time when I actually need to have it.
And one interesting thing about 5th edition in particular is that while there's definitely, I understand the feeling of I have this nice thing, I don't want to use it. All it does is grant you advantage. And there's a lot of other ways to earn advantage on a lot of things. Sure, maybe you want to really hang on to it for that death saving throw, or you want to really hang on to it for that save against the powerful boss spell. But just advantage doesn't feel great when there's a lot of other ways of going about it. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on about where you're talking about game masters having a hard time giving this out, from both sides, as a player, as a GM, it is hard. So going back to what Tyler was talking about with this rule of cool, humans will enjoy novelty. If you describe a very cool way that your character does a thing, it's real easy to say, that was neat, have advantage. And then it feels weird to reward that same thing with inspiration again. And that's just a problem with trying to use the rule of cool to award this stuff. One of the things that I've most enjoyed, I was a player in a game where the DM gave each player one inspiration token that they could give during the session as a way to take some of the burden off of the DM who is, running everything behind the screen. That time pun actually intended. But they have a lot of stuff going on. They're not going to think necessarily about inspiration, but the players, they're mostly just there to enjoy the story. While they may be thinking about it, they're going to have a much easier time thinking, that was really neat. That was a great bit of role play. That was really in character, and being able to award something like that.
Yeah, I really like the idea of that. Like, I think certain live play podcasts that you listen to, or even like in your own games, I feel like it's pretty common if you have the right players that they'll call out like, that was awesome. That was stupid. That was painful, but that was awesome. And I think you should reward that with inspiration. So like as a DM, like encouraging, tell me when you think something's awesome. And if I think you're full of it, then I'll let you know.
Rewarding stuff like that is probably the best way you can award metacurrencies. The 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide actually does a pretty good job explaining how to handle this. So if you're playing D&D, go read that. One of the best pieces of advice that they give is to use advantage to encourage behavior that fits the genre of the game that you're playing. As an example, they specifically call out, if you're playing a horror game, if the party splits up, give them advantage. That is kind of a classic horror trope where the party separates. Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy go off one direction and Freddy and Daphne go off the other. So yeah, advantage, go be spooked.
Inspiration.
Yeah, that one. Thank you.
But I mean, right, towards Ram's point earlier, what does it ultimately wind up being? It's pay it forward advantage.
Pretty much.
Hey, you're going to need this later.
Especially if you're splitting the party in a horror game.
No, but I took you off your train. So you were saying, yeah, like if you're in a horror game and the party splits up, you give that to them. If you're intriguing politics and somebody really engages, the bard gets up and gives a great performance to distract while somebody goes and does something like, that was a great plan, great execution, inspiration.
Yeah, those are all great examples. Yeah, just your general like heroic fantasy, your party does something heroic, inspiration. If you want to play a bunch of murder hobos and somebody sells their house and murders somebody in the space of 5 minutes, they're now a murder hobo. Give them inspiration.
Yeah, it's like I was a homeowner briefly. It's like, you've saved the town. I give you a house. Does not fit what we do here. Nice. I guess I want to heckle the 5e inspiration as you get advantage. Like, is that enough? Is that right? Can we do better?
A lot of people are going to say, yeah, probably myself included. Inspiration feels really good to receive. It doesn't feel great to spend, because advantage on one roll usually isn't going to make or break you. And the expectation, again, 5th edition Dungeons Master's Guide explains this a bit, but the expectation is each player will get inspiration once per session, which effectively means if you're playing a session of like a typical 4 to 6 hour session, you're going to get inspiration once in that entire session, and you're going to get to use that for advantage once in that entire session, if you even remember that you have it.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Technically, the rule is before you roll, you have to declare that you're going to use your inspiration and roll with advantage. You can't fail and then say, I want to try one more time.
Correct.
And even that is just like, I believe in my luck, except for if I'm rolling in roll 20, more than I believe that I really have to succeed here.
Yeah.
And even then, there's a certain percentage of time. Like it's maddening, right? Like, okay, I've avoided. I think I'm finally going to drink my elixir. I rolled a 20 on the first roll.
Feels wasted. Yeah, 100%. So super easy. You could change there. You could just make inspiration allow you to re-roll something. So you're dying. You're at 2 failures on your death saves and 2 successes, and it's down to the last roll. You roll a failure, spend your inspiration, re-roll that. Of course, at that point, you'd spend your inspiration anyway to get the advantage on the roll, but you take my meaning.
No, but I mean, exactly towards that point, like you would rather be able to do the re-roll. And so that if you succeed in the first one, you take it. You succeed on the second one, you take it. You fail on the third, you think, you know what, let's go ahead and shoot for it.
Yeah, totally.
Even just the ability to re-roll, like I feel like as a house rule, that has a lot of power. Another thing, right, to bring up, the idea of bardic inspiration, it's sitting right there, right? Like that would be, I think, a more interesting mechanic. And let me add that dice roll to any roll.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the 3.x mechanics did function that way. There was a metacurrency that you got 1 per level up in one of the optional systems that you could spend to add D6s to any D20 roll that you made. Now, this was far less impactful in 3.x, where the numbers scaled preposterously and the bonuses were often notably larger than the range possible in a D20, which is crazy to think about. But that sort of thing can be really good, although it does take away from one of the most flavorfully thematic things about bards. Bardic inspiration is an incredibly thematic, very unique thing that the bards get. Having that turn into just a standard game mechanic is really sometimes a net loss for bards. One other thing that I've seen inspiration used for, and while it's still just sort of advantage, it is a way to make it feel a bit more interesting for a lot of spellcasters. You can, as an optional rule, spend inspiration to force disadvantage on a roll that an enemy makes. For instance, if I'm going to spend my finger of death, I absolutely want this enemy to really suck on the con save. Roll with disadvantage. That helps spellcasters a lot because at higher levels, there aren't many attack roll spells that you can use. And so that's one way to keep it relevant. Even that is still just essentially advantage, but that's at least one way to keep it balanced as is.
I like that. I guess in that situation, if it was an area effect, would you let them enforce disadvantage on everything within the area of effect, or would you make them pick one enemy?
Ooh.
That's a tough call.
Depends on the DC. If it's a 13, yeah.
I might want to impose some additional cost. If it was for a sorcerer, let's say, all right, if you want to apply this, let's spend 2 sorcerer points for it as well. Or, some kind of similar, maybe that's your channel for a cleric, because that by itself is notably more powerful than what it is already and should come with some cost.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense to me.
At that point, so the heightened spell metamagic in 5e does something pretty similar. You pick one target of the spell and they suffer disadvantage on their save against the spell. Allowing you to spend inspiration to get that same effect makes a lot of sense. And yeah, maybe even if you don't have heightened spell, you just say, yeah, okay, spend inspiration and 2 sorcery points. Go for it.
Yeah, that feels like a good house rule. I want to go back. I want to heckle on the bard thing a little bit. I want to push back against Random, the argument that you were making. So one thing, right, the bardic inspiration does scale. And I assume with this, we would probably limit it. It's always just the plus D6. And so there's a little bit of something special even for the bard there. But the other thing is, like, I'm going to flip it on its head. I'm going to spin it the other way. Bards are so cool. They get to give inspiration on their own without the blessing of the DM. That's pretty exciting, right?
It sure is. I like it a lot. Yeah, Bardic Inspiration is arguably one of the best support features in the game. So they started a D6 for the Bardic Inspiration dice, which is an average of 3.5. Advantage on average is a little bit more than +3. So right off the bat, mathematically, Bardic Inspiration is already better than advantage. And it scales up to D12, so it nearly doubles in effectiveness.
Nice. And also with Bardic Inspiration, you don't have to add it to a D20, right? Can't you add it to an attack roll as well?
Not by default. I believe College of Valor lets you add it to... Oh, sorry, you said attack roll. College of Valor lets you add it to damage rolls, but you can add it to attack rolls, skill checks, and saving throw.
And what I meant was a damage roll, yeah. But yeah, you interpreted what I was trying to say properly.
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Absolutely.
So I want to go back to random suggestion earlier of players awarding inspiration. I don't know if other RPGs have that mechanic. The 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide does actually suggest that as a variant rule. And honestly, I think it's a really, really good idea. Having extra people at the table deciding what is cool, what is exciting. Yeah, exactly to Random's points. The DM's pretty distracted. They're doing a lot of stuff. You have to be the world. Do you also have to be the judge of what is cool? And I think, Random, I think you mentioned using a physical token as well that you passed around.
This is a Christmas present I got for my DM who was having trouble with giving inspiration and who actively said that he knew that he was having trouble giving inspiration. On Etsy, got like 8 nice little laser cut and wood burned discs. And having something physical is both a great way to make the act of giving it more impactful, but also almost more important is that remembering to use it. Like you talked about earlier, just on the D&D Beyond character sheet, there's a little square that you can check to say that you have inspiration, which is lovely. I think the paper character sheet might have it too. But even so, you're not generally looking at your character sheet once you've spent half a dozen sessions as this character. You mostly know how it works, and really you're only going to go to the sheet if you're thinking about something weird. In particular, if you're focused on the story, which is really what a lot of role-playing games are meant to be about. They are cooperative storytelling. If you're focused on the story, you're not looking at that little box on your sheet. So having the physical reminder to say, yes, I have this thing that I can spend, turned out to be really helpful for us.
Okay. It's cool to hear that worked out.
I think for in-person games, like that would be an awesome thing to have, where part of, I think what's powerful there is the idea that like, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Like you have the opportunity per session, so take advantage of it. And it doesn't cost you anything to give it away because you're going to give it to player A or player B, but no matter what, you're going to give it away. So I really like the idea of that. I'm actually imagining a way too complicated system of doing something like this in Roll20, where like, if within 30 seconds, if multiple people hit a hidden box to say like, I think character A deserves inspiration right now, then they get it.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
We could program that. We can make that work.
It'd be super easy. Totally work. I'm going to write strongly written letter. We'll link to the podcast. They'll understand. They'll listen.
Another problem that I have with inspiration is actually remembering to use it once you get it. The game I'm in currently, I have inspiration from, I think, session 1, session 2, and I think we're on like 9 or 10. DM hasn't given out inspiration a whole lot, but boy, I 100% forgot I had it. What do you guys think I could do to remember to actually use my inspiration?
I mean, I think even just talking about it at the table, I feel like that's maybe if everybody talked about it and everybody brought up when they thought that somebody should get it, and like if it just became a common thing that was part of the game, I think the DM's going to do a better job of rewarding it, and I think you're going to do a better job of consuming it.
That really is. I mean, part of it is just practice, particularly for people coming from previous editions where, technically speaking, yes, 3.5 did have metacurrencies, but not really, because the action points were such a bizarre mechanic and they were largely ignored.
It was an optional rule in Unearthed Arcana,
So coming to 5th edition, if you don't have that practice, then it can absolutely be. And, like any other discipline, just getting more used to it. If you are in person and can have something nice like a physical reminder, that's great. If you're not in person, then thinking about how am I going to remind myself given that there is meant to be something like once per session the DM gives it, if you just set yourself a hour reminder, an hour timer saying, think about inspiration. And if you just do that for your first 5-10 sessions of a campaign, that's going to get people thinking about it. And that's going to get people in the practice of, okay, how should I be thinking about this? How should I be thinking about how to get it and spend it? And as a corollary to that, if you are thinking about how to get it, you're going to end up with more of those cool moments that are the highlights of storytelling. Now,
one thing that a lot of people forget with 5th edition's inspiration mechanic is it's a Boolean. You have it or you don't. There's no like, I have inspiration twice, I have it 3 times. So if you forget to use it, you could very much find yourself in a situation where like, yes, I already had inspiration from way back when, and I just got it again. It feels like I wasted it.
You did.
I what?
You did actually waste it, yes.
Yeah. So do you guys think it would be okay to instead have it just be like, you have it or you don't, it's a pool like it is in a lot of other RPGs?
I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I can imagine setting a cap of 2. Like, I'll give you 1 mulligan, but probably ought to burn this.
Especially as written, if you just use it as written, where it just grants advantage, there's no reason not to have as many as you feel like, because just advantage, already mechanically, you can't stack that for a single roll. So you can't say, I want to spend 3 inspiration and roll this 4 times. That's already impossible. So if you're not doing any other optional rules, there's kind of no reason not to let it stack. And the worst from a DM perspective, all you're going to have is if somebody stockpiles it for a year, maybe they just have 1 session where they just go off, just advantage every single roll. And it's great. And interestingly, that actually also mirrors real world stories. If you go and look at one of the literal oldest stories of humans, the Odyssey, if you go read the actual original text of it, sorry, not the Odyssey, I meant the Iliad, there are sections where this is just the section where Ajax went off. And this is the section where Ajax fans get to really enjoy him cleaving through the battlefield, doing crazy stuff. And that's a good story. Clearly, it's survived for millennia.
Just a few.
Right? There's no reason not to have that as long as it's just advantage. And even if you allow for some of the other stuff as well, I would probably be pretty hesitant myself of combining that with the reroll, because you don't want things to be rerolled eternally. Now, if you say any single die can be rerolled no more than once, absolutely. Because then it's basically just advantage, but a little bit stronger, right?
Yeah, that's the fix. 100%. No, definitely. I guess maybe a slightly different question, right? Let's say we allow the reroll. What are you allowing as a player character? What are you rerolling? Because I feel like the only time this really matters, 100% matters, is combat. So my experience with my DMs is typically, if it's like, I want you to do a perception or maybe an investigation roll, I don't know. If you're doing one of these things, it's everybody's going to roll. Somebody's going to succeed. I'm not going to waste my inspiration to re-roll a shitty perception roll. I'm just going to have them tell me that I found the potato, But vice versa, like combat, obviously, that's a place where like, okay, I'm a sorcerer. I just used one of my level 2 spells and I missed. I'm going to re-roll that. Or if you allow the disadvantage roll, I'm going to impose the disadvantage roll ahead of time because I want to make sure that this level 2 hits.
Rerolls are always going to be used when the stakes are high. Combat is usually when the stakes are high because the consequence of failure in combat is frequently death. If you're looking for a potato in a box, if you don't find the potato, you just don't have a potato. If you're trying to kill someone before he kills you and you fail, then you're dead. Now, there are non-combat situations where the stakes are really high, like disarming traps, social situations like, yes, the conquering hero has returned from their mighty quest to slay the dragon and has come back to pour out his feelings to the princess, and you roll a persuasion check in front of the whole court and get a natural 1 and you're laughed out of town and your personal legend is ruined. At that point, you're like, I'm going to spend inspiration and I'm going to re-roll that to not make an ass of myself.
But I guess maybe this is me picking on my collective DMs, or maybe even myself as a DM, right? in that situation, that exact situation. So he just spent an entire arc trying to get me in front of the princess, holding a dragon head, wearing a moose head as a belt buckle. And I pour out my heart, except for I roll a 1. And so me pouring out my heart sounds really stupid. My DM's going to bail me out of that, right? Do I need to use my inspiration to roll it? Honestly, my DM might bail me out.
No.
By reminding me, you have inspiration.
That would be a great time for your DM to remind you ahead of time to use your inspiration on the high stakes roll. I agree with you.
But you were saying that actually my DM is going to let me fall on my face.
Oh, as the DM, 100%. What?
100%.
Okay.
Yes. One day we'll do that episode on failure and we'll talk about how interesting and exciting failure can be. But boy, what a conclusion to a story to come back and walk away with nothing.
Yeah, you tried to bow. You poked her in the face with a moose antler.
Well, you were trying to wear a moose as a belt buckle. What did you expect?
Victory.
Yeah, so the DM can't necessarily be responsible for holding your hand, reminding you that you have the mechanics. Sometimes you've got to let players fail. Sometimes you've got to just let people forget stuff, and that's okay. That's part of the game too.
You know, and I guess maybe this is a whole other session, right? But the idea, if you know you're on the railroad, then these little things maybe aren't as important. But yeah, that's probably another session. All right. Yeah, definitely another session. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I am Randall James. You can find me at amateurjack.com or at jackamateur on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Tyler Campster. You can find me online at RPGBOT.net. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at RPGBOT.net because RPGBot was already taken.
I'm Random Hell. You won't generally find me on social media, but if you investigate places where people play games, you will likely find me as Harlequin or Harlequint. But in general, you're mostly going to find me contributing here to RPGBot, both in articles and here on the podcast.
Awesome. So you can find us anywhere where fine podcasts are sold. Also, please visit us at RPGBOT.net, where you can find both the show notes for this podcast as well as the greater website, which is RPGBOT.net. All right, thanks.
It'll read the chicken entrails to you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.